We're happy to report this week MDOT is proposing solutions for rail cars that have been sitting idle in Owasso, costing the state millions of dollars. This
has been covered extensively by the 7 investigators who showed you those cars back in February. Since 2010, those cars have cost taxpayers about $12 million. They were supposed to be used for commuter lines between Detroit and Ann Arbor and Howell. The news sparked outrage among legislators and the public, and in February, MDOT promised it would come up with a plan to stop the bleeding.
All right, so this week the report came out saying the cars are not likely to be used until 2019. That's the bad news. In the report, though, MDOT proposes 3 options to deal with the idle cars, ranging from terminating the lease at the end of the year to renegotiating the lease and then subleasing some of those cars.
Meanwhile, we all know this, it's pothole season, and MDOT has been busy fixing some of our state's broken roads. With less than 2 weeks now until Election Day for Proposal 1, we're answering some of your questions about this critical issue that will impact you every day.
And today we're very fortunate to be joined by Kirk Steidel, the director of MDOT, to discuss some of these issues. Okay, and I'm going to put these 2 issues together. Here we are trying to figure out how to pay for the roads, and meanwhile we're paying something like $3,000 a day, if my figures are correct, maintaining these railroad cars that don't go anywhere. Right. What's the plan?
So the rail cars, first of all, people need to understand that there's separation of funds here. So the rail car funding cannot be used for maintaining or building roads and bridges. It's set specifically for transit and rail.
And you know how that irritates taxpayers,
yes,
because it comes out of the same pocket. It's all our pocket.
That's right. But it's in our Constitution that says this has to be separated for transit and rail.
When the outrage was out about all of this and these cars sitting and whatnot, you did come up with, you knew you had to do something, and so you have now released 3 different proposals. In a nutshell, because we don't have tons of time, but what are the 3 proposals, and which do you think will save us the most money in the long run here?
So there's 2 options. One, if we want to maintain control of these cars for the future when the rail does get running, then we do a sublease. There's 4 agencies across the country that we're talking with right now that are very interested in those. Now, I've given our team until June 30th to come up with hard negotiated leases. Are we're going to sign these or not? And at that point, if there's not, then we're going to go to termination of the contract, which basically means we sell the cars, or the Great Lakes Railroad sells the car, and we recoup some of that cost, some of our investment back into them.
That's one option.
Downside, well, that's 2 in there, right?
Okay.
That's, one is to sublease the cars. The other one is to just terminate immediately.
Okay.
So we're going to roll both of those together to get the best value.
And there's a danger in this, because if we're not going to use the cars until 2019, they are mechanical things, and there is a technology involved, and they risk becoming obsolete before you even put them on a track.
Not so much, because these are rail cars that's pretty standard. I mean, the overhauls went into the trucks down below, the wheels, the seats in the middle. The technology part, they're getting pulled by an engine. So they don't change that much over time.
We want to move on to Prop 1 now, because certainly everyone cares about our broken roads out there for sure. And a big vote, we all know, is coming up in a week and a half. This is really a complex issue. I think a lot of voters not quite understanding yet, because there's just so much to it. I guess, first of all, why does it have to be so complex and involve so many different taxes to get this done?
So, in December 18th, you had the leadership of the House and the Senate and the governor stand up and say, look, this is our compromise plan. So it's complicated because it took a lot of compromise by those leaders to come together and say, this is what we're going to put forward. Clearly, there's a lot of people who like one plan or the other, but there wasn't consensus within the legislature to get there. So the plan that we have basically does 2 things. One, it says that the taxes that you pay at the pump will be constitutionally restricted to go to roads. The taxes that you pay in sales tax at the retail store, those are constitutionally restricted to go to schools and cities.
So
that's kind of it in a nutshell.
When you hear people say, well, there's a 1% sales tax, but it doesn't even go to the roads, that's because the gas tax now will go to the roads when it all hasn't before.
Right. Well, so there's 2 taxes right now on gas. There's the 19 cents a gallon, and there's sales tax. And the sales tax is constitutionally restricted to go to schools and cities. Okay. So when you pay sales tax at the pump, the sales tax is going to schools and cities. So when you take it off, now you can increase the tax at the pump to go to fund roads. Okay. And then the sales tax piece is that's $1 billion. There's $1 billion of sales tax on top of motor fuels. If you take that off, that's a real cut to schools and cities. So in order to replace it, you've got to increase the source of funding for schools and cities, which is the sales tax.
Okay, Robert, that brings us to our first question that we got sent to us by Facebook, which is actually very similar to what Joanna was just saying. Is it true that the money will go to pay off debt for the first 2 years before it ever even touches roads?
Yeah, that was a piece put in there by the House of Representatives, specifically the Speaker. He was concerned. We've got $2.2 billion of state trunk line debt. Now, this goes back to the the late 90s when the gas tax was passed and all through the 2000s. There's $2.5 billion in debt. $239 million of the MDOT budget goes to pay those.
So the roads don't get any money for 2 years?
No, so that there's $400 million in the first year that go through the formula distribution to all the agencies. There's another $800 the next year, and then $1.2 billion the third.
What about this urgency to fix the roads right now? We're not getting money for 2 years.
So there's a ramp-up period, right? If you think about this, the construction industry has been decreasing in size because we haven't had funds. They haven't hired the new people. They've got aggregate plants. They've got pits that haven't been opened. So they've got a ramp-up period. No, here's what's coming. Now let's gear up with the people and equipment, and we can get out there. If you just push a bunch of money out to projects right away, all you end up doing is creating higher prices, and you pay more for the same amount of work. So it's a bit of there's a transition period to get everybody up to speed.
You mentioned distributing the money to the different agencies. That brings us to a question we got from Cindy Evans-Massey, who says, how would you plan to divide up the money between counties? Which counties get the biggest share? How does that work?
So that goes back to a formula that was put in place in 1951. It's the same formula, covers all 600 plus agencies across the state. So the big split is 10% goes to comprehensive transportation, transit and rail. And then in this case, $1.2 billion, 39% goes to MDOT. That's for the interstates, the US and the M routes, so the freeways. 39% then goes, or the other 39 goes to counties. For county roads, 22% go to cities.
Okay, so all the roads are covered in that.
All the roads are covered, and then that 61% is dictated at the local level. What's the needs at the county level or the city level?
Yeah, the final point I want to bring up here is this, according to all the polls, this is going to crash and burn. That's what they're all saying right now. What happens? What do you do then?
Well, we're going to continue to use the revenue that we have as efficiently as possible our 5-year plan is based on the revenue that we have coming in. The big thing is the last 3 years we've had general fund put in our budget just to match federal aid. So the legislature is going to have to go back and figure out where that general fund money comes from just to match the federal aid. And that doesn't improve the road. So
the governor said there was no plan B. I remember when all this came to be, so we'll have to see. We really appreciate your time
Anybody
today.
that thinks this is plan A, this is not plan A.
It's plan only.
That's right.
You're right.
Kirk Steindl, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much
Absolutely.
for talking
Thank you.
today. And remember, there really are only now 11 days left before you cast your vote for Proposal 1. Be sure to stay with 7 Action News and WXYZ.com for all the information you need to be informed before heading to the polls.
All right, still heading our way right now on